Look, we call it the Rainmakers Dilemma. And here's the thing. I think most contractors are their company's greatest asset in the early years.
Hey, John, glad to have you here today.
Yeah, good to be with you, Spencer.
Yeah, I'm excited because, one, I've read two of your books, and they both had a big impact on me and our business that we've been working on over here. But I think the ideas and the concepts are super relevant and applicable to our audience, but maybe not some of the reasons, maybe not in the way that we want them to be. But we can kind of dive into that. But I'm curious, what were you doing before you wrote that Built to Sell book? I think that was several years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago at this point.
Yeah, well, I was actually running a quantitative market research business. So service business, like a lot of your listeners, different industry, but similar in the sense that it was very lumpy. Projects would last 3 months, 6 months, different customer each time, reinventing myself every month. And eventually I got kind of burnt out. We were 5 or 6 million in revenue. It was pretty profitable. I mean, 20, 30% profit margins. And we had great clients. Like we had Wells Fargo and Bank of America and all these massive clients. And I said, I want to sell. And I went to see an M&A guy. So these are the professionals who sell companies. And I kind of walked in, thinking I was sitting on this gold mine. I was rubbing my hands together saying, Perry, what do you think it's worth? And he's like, well, it depends on the answer to a couple of questions. I'm like, shoot. He's like, all right. Well, who does the research? And I'm like, well, I'm involved. I mean, we do work with Bank of America. Of course, I've got to be involved in that. And he says, all right, well, who does the selling? I'm like, we're a small company. Of course, they want me to show up, he said, all right, so let me get this straight. You got a research company, you do this research, you do the selling. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you put it that way. And he's like, yeah, there's nothing, I can't sell your company. There's nothing to sell. And I remember rebutting him at the time thinking, but hold on, Perry, like we've got, more than $1 million of EBITDA. Like this is a profitable company. This is like, look at all these clients. I tell you, Bank of America. He's like, none of that matters. If you can't run this company without you, none of that matters. You just have a fancy job. And oh man, it was like getting kicked in the teeth. It was brutal because again, I walked in there thinking someone would want to buy my client list or, the profitability of the company, et cetera. And Perry quickly disabused me of that. Really kind of taught me that that's not what makes your company sellable or valuable to anybody else other than you.
Yep, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, and I think that happens a lot in our industry as residential construction companies too, because I think a lot of times those companies just get dissolved, or maybe hopefully they get passed down, and that's a way to transfer that, and you do a buyout over time. But to your point, I guess if the owner is too involved, then you can't sell it. And I guess my next question would be, why is that? What's at the crux of that?
Yeah, because there's no barrier to entry a construction business, right? Like anybody who's got a credit card can go up, buy some tools, and they're in a construction business. They don't have to know what they're doing. They don't have to be 20-year veterans like most of your listeners. They can just show up. And as long as there's no barrier to entry, an acquirer will look at this business and say, why would I buy it? Why wouldn't I just compete with them? Why would I actually buy this company when I could just hire that employee, pay them a 20% premium, and basically take everything they've got, because they're not doing anything proprietary, so anything unique. Again, most acquirers, again, listeners may not want to sell their business for decades, but it helps to know what acquirers look for, because it can help you sort of build your business over time. Most acquirers, when you're not in the room, they're going to have a build versus buy decision. And they're not talking about building kitchens or bathrooms. What they're talking about is building what you've created or buying your company. And if they're going to, first of all, calculate like how long it would take them to basically buy what you've created. So if you're a $2 million kitchen and bathroom renovator, they're going to say, okay, well, they know how long it's going to take them to win that amount of business. If you've got 4 guys on your staff, they're going to go, okay, I know how to, how that's just going to cost me to attract and train those people. And they're going to offer you a significant discount off that number. And that number is pretty low. And so what generally happens is you're not trading construction businesses for more than 1 or 2 years of profitability at most. And so most construction guys go, well, why would I sell if all I can get is 1 time's profit? I'll just keep the business.
Yep.
Yet they're in this trap that they can never get out of because they haven't built anything that's not dependent on them. And that's the quintessential challenge of a construction business.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So I'm sure it doesn't happen often, and we don't see it a lot. But I'm sure there are some guys that manage to pull it off. So if somebody were to want to sell their business, are there a couple of like key pieces, or is it simply just the owner has to remove themselves and they got to set up systems, or is that like not enough? Because like you said, somebody can just go build it and say, "Yeah, I'll just do that instead."
Yeah, I mean, the first step is most construction companies and most service businesses and most businesses are like a mile wide in terms of what they offer, and oftentimes an inch deep. In other words, they go in, they say, what do you want done? And you want a deck? Great. You want a new roof? No problem. You want a kitchen? You want a bathroom? You want a spare bedroom? I can do it all. I understand construction. The problem with that is it takes years to develop the same degree of experience that you have, and therefore you can't hire employees. As long as you can't hire employees, all you've got is you and a couple of helpers. And so that doesn't translate into a business you could transfer. What you need to do is pick one thing. In other words, go from selling lots of things to a few people to doing exactly the opposite. So figuring out doing one thing better than anybody else, and then you can go scale and hire. So we just had a swimming pool installed at our house, and these guys were saltwater pool concrete specialists, right?
Pretty
They don't,
specific.
they don't do vinyl, they don't do chlorine, they don't do kidney shaped pools or pools for golf club. I mean, they're very specific, residential, concrete, blah, blah, blah. And so once you do that, you can start getting some repeatability. You can train some staff to do the concrete pools, understand the difference between salt and chlorine and recommend salt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can train them on that technique. That's what I'm talking about in terms of, but most folks are just like we're socialized, unfortunately, as entrepreneurs to chase revenue, right? The Inc. 5000 is the 5,000 fastest growing companies, right? And that's like we like puff our chest out and say, yeah, I'm at 1 million, or I'm at 5 million, or I'm at 20 employees, I'm at 50 employees. I mean, like that's how we sort of boast to one another as entrepreneurs, right? The challenge with revenue or top line or size as a proxy is oftentimes it doesn't translate into value. You're just running on a hamster wheel, but you're not actually building value. Value, again, comes from, can someone else do this company without you? And the first step, I think, is really narrowing down what you offer. I mean, we had, this pool project. There was a guy who just did, we got glass instead of getting like, you know, wood railings or metal railings, we got glass railings so it didn't obstruct the view of the pool. Well, there's a guy that just does glass railings, right? And there's an installation process, there's a cutting process, and there's like that's a sellable company because you can hire a bunch of semi-skilled people to install if you teach them how to install the glass railing. But as long as you're doing everything from kitchens to bathrooms to decks, you can't translate that business or transfer that business. Therefore, it's not sellable. So the big advice I would say is you got to pick one thing and build your business around something that makes you unique, special, different in the marketplace.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so counterintuitive because you feel like you're giving up revenue, but it's very much that like doctor
But it's
approach,
hamster wheel revenue, right?
Yep.
Like it's just treadmill revenue. It's not, you're not building anything of value. You're just chasing. You said before we hit record, guys will do 2 million in kitchens and bathrooms, and they'll get to the end of the month and they'll go, how am I possibly going to recreate what I did this month, next month? Because I got to go find new customers. I got to get it's exhausting, right? Because you're always starting every month from zero, and that's what I think some people just reach their end of the rope and they're like, okay, I'm willing to have a smaller company if at least I can feel like I'm building something of transferable value. I don't mind taking a zero off my revenue if I feel like over time it's going to be a valuable transferable company.
Yeah, no, that's awesome advice, and it's interesting because we did that as an agency at the beginning. We kind of we came out of a direct mail background, and so we were just kind of like an incubator within that company, and we were just going after anybody and everybody. And then we realized like, hey, we've got family in this industry. They were kind of our case study. And then as soon as we started saying no to everything else other than it was like everything got easier. It was, but not just from a marketing and sales standpoint, operations, efficiency, training staff, like all those things.
It creates an
So
amazing domino effect. I'm so glad you brought that up because people are afraid of oh, I don't want to turn down that client, or oh, you know, what are they going to think of me if I say no to that job? I'll never get asked again. If I that referral who referred me in, that great old client who said, hey, you should talk to Bob. If I turn his client or his happy customer or his buddy down, what's that going to be? Here's what it does. If you say you're the world's best saltwater concrete swimming pool installation company, you get a reputation. You get a halo effect from that. You get referability. If you think about the last time you referred somebody, my guess is it wasn't a generalist. It wasn't a general accountant or a general home builder. It was like the guy or gal that has some really obscure niche where you're like, oh, you want to install glass railings around your pool? Okay, there's one company that does that. And that's the kind of referability you get when you do one thing. And yeah, it takes a lot of courage and discipline because there are huge forces, societal as well as just chasing, you know, making payroll that force you to want to take all jobs. But it's a treadmill to nowhere in my experience.
yeah, yeah. And I will say it was scary when we started turning that down because you're like,
Mm.
it's right in front of you. You know, how can you? And so we kind of took that leap of faith. In your experience, I know you've helped, you know, thousands of businesses work on building more value into their business. Is it just a leap of faith, or are there like a couple of things that could, you know, for somebody listening, they're going, okay, like I'm thinking about maybe I'm just gonna do, you know, master baths or you know, something like that. Like, are there a couple of things that kind of give that person a little confidence to make that leap of faith, or is it
Yeah.
truly just
Yeah, no, for sure. So a couple of things. First of all, find your TVR. So teachable, valuable, repeatable. So find a service or some sort of offering that you can teach employees to do that's valuable to customers and is repeatable, has a recurring nature to the revenue. Customers need it on a recurring basis. So swimming pool, like installation, although a specialty, is not a great TVR because you only need a swimming pool once every 30 years or probably once in your lifetime. So that's not a great TVR. But if you had a swimming pool company that offered a pool maintenance program where they came in and not only installed, but also took care of and rebalanced the, you know, the salt and so forth, that's the kind of TVR. The R in TVR stands for repeatable. So that would get you into that sort of zone. So figure out your TVR is the first step of the process. Then productize. Productizing means making your service sound like a product. And that sounds like marketing lingo. It is effectively. It's making what you offer today as a service by the hour, by the day, whatever, and making it look like a thing. So naming your service, proprietary steps in the service, making it look tangible like a thing, even trademarking the name and the steps in your process. And here's what that does. It makes you the owner of that process as opposed to being a generic builder. When you're a generic builder, people can compare you with five other generic builders, right? And all of a sudden you're race to the bottom, your commodity. Whereas if you are the specialist in the one day installation of glass railings, as an example, glass, you know, whatever, barriers, whatever, I can't think of the word, uh, then you can name that process and you can create marketing differentiation. And when you have a productized service, you can start charging up front. Because if you think about what your own experience is, like I dare say the last time you bought a product, like a physical product, something you could hold in your hand, the mic in front of you, you paid for it, they shipped it to you, you installed it, you started using it, right? Whereas if you look back at the guy who made the wood frame behind you, or the accountant who did your books last year, my guess is that they administered the service and then they sent you an invoice. And so service companies have a negative cash flow cycle. And that's one of the reasons people don't have a lot of courage to make the shift, because they're living hand to mouth anyways. Whereas if you switch and you become a productized service, a thing that sounds real, all of a sudden you can charge up front. right? Because we're socialized to buy products up front. So if you have the 6-step glass railing installation process, oh, you want the 6-step glass installation process? Great. Well, it's 75% up front and 25% when we install the product. Why? Well, because it's a process that we only own. So we get to dictate the terms. And that gives people courage when they're getting cash up front to start making some of these bold changes. And so I'm a big believer in first productizing and then charging up front a big chunk of what you do rather than, billing by the hour or by the day and sending an invoice 3 months later and hoping to get paid. It's just a crappy way to run a business. So I big believer in productizing and then charging up front.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Well, and you mentioned something in there on the repeatable side that ties into your second book, I guess, which was the automatic customer. And I remember reading that and thinking about our industry, and I kept thinking, kitchen and bath guys, whole home remodeling guys, like, man, what if you just had like a home maintenance service that you charge them, monthly or quarterly, and you come by 4 times a year and you check all the, light bulbs, smoke detectors, like all just like everything
Yeah.
and anything. So somebody's like, I don't have to worry about this stuff. These guys just show up. But I guess for this industry, you don't see that often. You even mentioned it with the pool cleaning. Like if they had a maintenance program, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
why is recurring so valuable, when you look at just the products versus a recurring customer?
Yeah, because when an acquirer acquires place a value on your company, right? And so when an acquirer looks at your company, effectively what they're buying is your future stream of profit. And that's something I didn't understand when I went to sell my company. I didn't really understand what they were buying or what made my company valuable. And again, they're buying your future stream of profit. And if that's reliant on you or personally showing up to do the work, then there's no value in your company. Yet, if you have a recurring revenue stream that's not incumbent or dependent on you making the sale, then they can see profit into the future and therefore they will value your business more highly. I'll give an example. It's in the kind of home maintenance space, but not exactly what your listeners do. It's from the security industry where
Mm,
security companies that come and install the security system, right? They wire up the windows and the sensors and so forth. They have two forms of revenue. They have installation revenue, which is the one and done akin to building out a kitchen. And they have the monitoring revenue, which is the service contract revenue. You pay them to monitor the system and call the cops if there's a break in. Typical alarm or security company will get about 75% for every dollar of installation revenue and about $3 for every dollar of recurring revenue. Said another way, your recurring revenue in a security business is worth about 4 times every dollar of installation revenue. So for anybody in this space, it really makes sense to think about, okay, how do I create some sort of service contract tail recurring model that will give me that recurring revenue?
that makes sense. Yeah, it's basically predictability. They can go, okay, I can already see the revenue happening without anybody doing any more work because they're already customer, or a little bit of work. Um, yeah, that's interesting. I feel like a lot of people, yeah, you just think of it, you're kind of just looking one step in front. You're just saying, okay, how do I land this next project? What does that look like?
Right.
Um, so for, kitchen bath guys, these pool guys, like I'm just trying to think about somebody sitting there and they've been kind of doing what they've been doing for 15, 20 years. And they're going, okay, I could see how maybe I could get more narrow, or maybe I should explore this recurring. Is it the sort of thing where you recommend somebody start with one? Is one more valuable, or should you kind of attack both of those pieces together?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest mistake in figuring out your recurring model is to try to create a subscription or recurring service contract for all of your customers. And if you have been in the
Mhm.
business for 15 or 20 years, you could look at the variety and the depth of the types of customers you've had. Some guy wants a kitchen, another person wants a bathroom, someone has a 5,000 square foot mansion, another person has a 1,500 square foot condo. Like it's everything, every project is different. And if you try to create a service plan or contract, I think to appeal to all of your types of customers, it's a recipe for a diluted, unattractive, unappealing offering. And I think you're going to fail. I think the first step you need to take is to first segment your customers by the reason they buy from you. So, really try to understand what it is that makes somebody who gets you in to do a kitchen in a condo in a building in an urban environment, and how they're different than the guy or gal who lives in a 5,000 square foot house out in the country, and really start to think about and segment your customers based on why they buy from you, what triggered them to call you in the first place. And what I think you might find is going through that process, you identify segments of your customers where a recurring revenue stream might make sense. I mean, I'll give you an example outside of construction, but I think it serves to just demonstrate the point. It was in the Automatic Customer, if you read it. It's the story of H. Bloom, right? Where they're in the business of selling flowers. Flowers are like, you think construction's tough. I mean, try selling flowers.
Yeah.
Like, I
Jeez.
mean, the inventory starts to die as soon as the farmer cuts it. The typical flower store throws out half of its inventory every single month because it's dead on the vine.
Crazy.
30% of all flowers bought Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. So look, you got huge seasonality problems. And then how do you get people to buy flowers? Well, you have to buy some really expensive real estate or rent some real estate. You know, it's brutal. So these two guys come along, Sanyu Panda, Brian Burkhart, and they said, we're going to sell flowers on subscription. But instead of trying to create a subscription for anybody who buys flowers, you know, people who buy weddings and funerals and graduation, they said, okay, what are all the reasons people buy flowers? Most of them are for events like Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, and weddings and stuff. Then they discovered there's this kind of tiny little segment of the flower buying universe that buys flowers for an entirely different reason. And those are hotels. And if you think about it, hotels will buy fresh cut flowers for their reception table because they want to look prestigious. Or they want to justify the $300, $400 a night they're charging you. So they have nice flowers. Panda and Burkhart started this company called H. Bloom. And instead of selling flowers to retail in a retail environment, they sell flowers on subscription. The average lifetime value of an H. Bloom subscriber is more than $4,500. Compare
Amazing.
that to the average transaction we spend, you know, forget our wife or husband's wedding or wedding anniversary, it's like $50, right? It's a much, much more valuable company to acquire because H. Bloom has recurring revenue. And so I think, again, the first step is not to try to figure out, okay, I do kitchens and bathrooms and decks, and I got to come up with something that everybody's going to want, is to think about what are the reasons people buy, segment just like H. Bloom, and try to find a slice or a sliver of the market for whom buying from you they have a recurring need to buy from you. And that's, I think, the raw material for designing a subscription offering.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great example because it's almost what you would think of near last, when you think of flower
Right.
buying.
Okay, I'll come up with my subscription offering and then I'll go figure out who's going to want to buy it.
Yep.
You want to do the exact opposite, right? You want to figure out why people buy what you sell and then try to figure out, okay, among all those different people, is there one who needs it on a recurring basis? Like subs, like if you offer glass installation as an example, well, you're probably a sub to a GC. And your customer is probably not the homeowner, that's probably the general contractor, right? So you could start to think about, okay, does that GC hire me on a regular cadence? Okay, yes. Great. What does he or she need from me? What would he or she value from me coming from me on a regular cadence? Would it be valuable, for example, to say, like, any customer for that GC that needs a repair job on their glass, I will do it. And all the GC needs to do is pay me like, again, I'm going out over my skis here because I don't know the business as well as you do. But I think really segmenting your customers and figuring out what the recurring model might look like, I think, is the first step.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's good advice. And even to your point too, with the flower example, like look at your customers, even the ones that you maybe do one or two of those jobs a year for, even if the bulk of what you do, because that may be the one that's the good fit for the recurring. You just don't know until you kind of dive in. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, taking this in just a little bit different direction. Obviously we do marketing for these types of businesses. We're an agency, and I feel like one of the biggest challenges this industry faces is kind of that feast or famine. Like you're doing 2 million, then you drop to a million, then you ramp back up, but you're kind of all over the board and pretty much at the whim of just what does the market look like. So right now everyone's busy. Like you could be new in business and you'd probably have a full plate right now. um, I think like having that marketing and sales engine adds that repeatability. But I'd love to hear your take on that, and maybe even just in comparison to some of these other things that add value. Like if you've got one of these project-based businesses, if you haven't productized it, you don't have a recurring, but at least you have like a marketing engine that produces a certain number of leads that you can count on. Does that help in any way, or is it just like, no, this is just a slightly better fancy job that you have?
Yeah, look, we call it the Rainmakers Dilemma. And here's the thing, I think most contractors are their company's greatest asset in the early years, right? So they're the ones who understand how to get the jobs done. They win the clients, the customers love them. They're the glue that makes it all work. And that gets the business up to 700,000, a million three, a million four, a million eight, whatever, something in that space where they eventually reach a plateau. And this is what we refer to as the Rainmaker's Dilemma, which is that if you're the rainmaker, the chief salesperson for your company, you will run out of hours in the day. And it's feast and famine. As soon as you start focusing on a job rather than filling the funnel, you start to lose traction, right? So it's the Rainmaker's Dilemma. And here's what I would say: the secret out of the Rainmaker's Dilemma is most people who have those skills, they have the right skills. They just need to transfer them to the right activity. So instead of doing the selling yourself or doing the marketing yourself, you want to build marketing funnels that take what you know about what customers want and the reasons they hire you over somebody else, and build out a white paper or build out a marketing funnel or build out a lead flow or a lead engine or some sort of lead magnet that basically what customers want. You've looked in the whites of their eyes. You understand when they're going to be pissed off and when they're going to be delighted and when they're going to refer you. Like, that because you've been doing it for 15, 20 years. You need to codify that. Instead of doing the selling yourself, build the marketing funnel, maybe hire you guys, but build the marketing funnel that basically takes what you know inherently from serving so many customers and codifying it. Uh, Institutionalizing, those are fancy ways for making it like not dependent on you to deliver. And that's through marketing funnels and investing in. And one of the biggest mistakes I think most of us make as entrepreneurs is we underinvestment in our greatest strength, right? So for most entrepreneurs, they're good influencers. They're good customer guys or gals, right? They can make a sale. And so they're like, I don't need to hire salespeople because I can do that, right? But I really want somebody, to do drywalling because I hate that job. Or I really need someone to do the books because I hate doing the books and sending the invoices. And so I need to hire that person. But no, don't worry about the selling. I'll do that because that's the last person I need to hire because I'm good with clients. All good. If you're happy with a business that generates 700 grand a year in revenue and maybe puts 100 grand on the bottom line, you don't need to hire anybody. You've got a job and that's great. But if you want to build a company and get past the Rainmaker's Dilemma, investing in your greatest strength, in other words, hiring salespeople, building out marketing funnels, is the secret to getting from 700 grand or a million two or a million four to 5, 10, 20 million. I did a podcast recently on Built to Sell Radio with a guy named Mike Aguilaro. Do you know Mike?
I don't know.
Built a company called Gold Medal Service out in New Jersey. And great story. He for the first 10 years of his business, he generates $700,000 in revenue a year. He kind of reaches that and then plateaus for all the same reasons we talked about. He had a partner in the business, and his partner threatens to leave. He walks in one day and says, Mike, I'm out. Like, I didn't get into business for this to kind of sit on this treadmill or whatever. And Mike says, hold on a second. Don't go. and they go on a retreat and they realize this Rainmakers Dilemma thing. They didn't call it that, but they realized they'd been way under investing in marketing. And they made the huge commitment right there to invest in marketing, to not make their greatest strength effectively their greatest weakness. One of the things they did, goofy little thing, Mike's wife went and did a bunch of research into colors, and they discovered that the human eye is attracted to yellow and black. For some reason, maybe hereditary, maybe evolution, the wasp or the bee was yellow and black. No. But the human eye is gravitates to yellow and black. So he painted all of his trucks yellow and black. Eventually, he scaled the business to 84 trucks, $34 million in revenue before he sold the company.
Wow.
For first 10 years in his business, he never clipped 700 grand in revenue. It was an amazing story, but it just goes to show you, I think our greatest weakness, or excuse me, our greatest strength is often we reach a point where it becomes our biggest, thing holding us back.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's cool. I'll have to go listen to that one.
Yeah. I mean, just Google Built to Sell Radio. I think gold medal service, and you'll find it.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Well, and John, we're kind of winding down here. We've got one last segment of the show that I'll get to in a second. But before I do that, what's the best way people can get connected with you or learn more about what you're up to and how you help companies, add more value?
We actually put together a landing page for your listeners. So if you go to builttosell.com/builder, builttosell.com/builder, we put together 8 videos there, which correspond with the 8 drivers of company value. There's a subscription model checklist where you can look at the 9 subscription models and pick one that might apply to your business. And there's also a workbook that you can use called the Art of Selling Your Business Workbook, which corresponds with the book I wrote in the same topic. So all that's free. So just go to builttosell.com/builder.
Cool. Yeah. And for you guys listening, as you know, we'll drop the link in the show notes for you, make it super easy. All right, John, last segment of the show, we call it the Fast Five. So I'll hit you with 5 rapid fire questions and then we'll wind it up here. First question, favorite business book and why, and we'll exclude the ones that you've written.
Small Giants, Bo Burlingham. Just a great book about, building a business with quality and care as opposed to chasing revenue.
I like it. All right. Who is the most inspirational person in your life?
I could say something cheesy like my kids or my wife, but I'm going to go with something a little less cheesy. I'm a big Elon Musk fan. I know he's controversial, but I also think if you think about his resume and you put it up against just about any other entrepreneur on the face of the earth, I mean, he has done more from PayPal to SpaceX to obviously Tesla. And I mean, the Boring Company, it's mind blowing what he's created. So I think he's pretty inspiring.
That's a good one. Yeah. Big thinker, it just really helps you expand your mind,
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. If you could have one superpower, what would that be?
Oh, that is a good question. You remember what's that movie with Mel Gibson where he knows what people think?
Oh yeah, ability to read minds.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great if you like be in an elevator with someone and you'd be able to like actually know what they're thinking? I think that'd be cool.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, could get you in trouble all over.
Yeah, I know that one definitely is a double-edged sword, I think. Yeah. All right, John, describe yourself in 3 words.
I don't know. At this moment, hungry, thirsty, and a little grumpy.
Hey, I like the honesty.
Yeah.
It's the end of the day, So
yeah.
All right. Final question is: if you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice, what would that be?
I think really just think about your company as, here's what I'd say. Most of the people listening to this are going to be parents. A lot of them are going to be parents, not all, but many of them are going to be parents. And you think about what you do as a parent. Some people want the kid to play college football for Alabama. Other people want their kid to go to Harvard. Most of us, though, have much more modest expectations for our kids. Right? Like we would like them to become fully functioning adults, able to like, make their breakfast in the morning and go about their business and be happy, productive citizens. Like that's kind of the job description of a parent for many of us, right? And and I think if you, instead of chasing the next job or the next client, you take the same attitude towards building your company. Instead of thinking of yourself as the CEO of your company, think of yourself as the parent of your company. And 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 what you've got to do is get that company to a point where it can live without you. It can kind of go off in the world without you doing everything. And maybe it feels like it's in diapers right now and you have to do everything literally. Maybe it feels like a precocious teenager and you kind of have to jump in at times and kind of redirect it. Or maybe it does feel like it exists without you. Whatever kind of end of the continuum you're on, I think just thinking of your role as a parent for your business as opposed to its CEO, I think really changes the way you make decisions. So I thought you said this was the fast five. That was like the slow five, but that's what I
That's all
would leave
right.
your listeners
Yeah.
with.
No, I love that analogy. Yeah, that as you were saying, I'm going, yeah, that makes I can kind of peg where I'm at in that journey with that
Cool.
analogy. So, well, John, thank you so much for carving out the time. I really enjoyed this. Like I said before, I've read a couple of the books. I need to pick up your latest one, but they've definitely had a positive impact on our business. So hopefully this conversation will for our listeners.
Cool, man. It's good to be with you, Spencer.
All right, thanks, John.